Hey everyone, welcome to the third episode of the podcast. I did finally come up with a name for everything, so we're going to call it Talking Dirty, the Racers Podcast. I'm here with Lex Shive. Lex, how you doing?
Good yourself.
I'm good. So we have a sponsor for this show, Bailey Fabrications, located in Kutztown, PA. Dennis Bailey is the owner. He's my grandfather. He supplies all the bumpers and rubber rails for a lot of Grandview Speedway. Also, if you need any body work or he builds carts for any kind of race car, he basically makes everything a lot easier for everyone. So go give him a call if you need anything. He'll hook you up. So Lex, I want to start out pretty basic. Who is Lex Shive?
I'm local guy. I'm 32. I currently live over in Limerick, Pennsylvania. Race shop's over at my dad's place over in Pennsburg, so obviously Grandview's that around the corner for us. Father, husband, realtor. I'm a level 1 CrossFit coach cert that I have. That's like my basic rundown. That race dirt bikes here and there. That's kind of like the off time type of thing. But that gives me like the basic breakdown of what I am, where I am.
Gotcha. So obviously you just said about outside racing you do a little bit of realtoring. And you want to break that down a little bit?
Yeah. So in my office, I work over out of Remax Reliance. That's over in Souderton, PA. It's 15, 20 minutes from my place over in Limerick. Been in the game since 2015. Pretty much handled residential, commercial, equestrian properties. I like the big garages is something I really try and target for more of the racing guys, of course. Real estate wise, I mean, it's been good. I started out early on with my first year, and actually it was like I was working at my dad's shop, working on machines pretty much. It was like all machining, painting, building parts, spinning a lathe or a mill and things like that during the day. Even, splitting wood out back at his property if that was what the day called for. But, yeah, it was, he got slow at some point. I was like, all right, we're going that in on real estate. So it's been, full time, pays the bills, fuels racing, gives me obviously the lifestyle to be able to, take care of my kids, have some fun in the middle, and keep a modified operation going at this point. But real estate's been good to me. It's good for advertising at Grandview, of course, as well.
Mm-hmm.
But again, and I work with my broker. He's one of our sponsors too, and him and I work as part of a team. So it's like a little bit of everybody gets involved. I'm able to like put more on the table than the average guy. So it's like kind of the angle I try and play, and again, what fuels us to be able to race on a regular basis and keep it going. So yeah, real estate's been good. I mean, it's obviously my number one biggest topic for obviously making sure that I can take care of what I got to take care of in life. But yeah, it's I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit more real estate along along the lines. But
yeah. So you just want to give a little bit of mention about your family and everything?
Yeah. I mean, just basic breakdown, or I had my wife Morgan. I have 2 kids. Leo's 5. Mia, she's like a year and a half. 4 dogs in the house. My racing operation is basically me and my dad. Again, he works out at his garage up in Pennsburg area, so we're close to the bull ring over there, of course. Yeah, it was. I mean, Grandview really started for us out of family. Really, that was my grandfather and Penn Valley Hobby Center. He had since passed in 2020, but that was he started taking my dad when, you know, early 70s and when he was like 8 years old. So he's, you know, that was kind of, and it wasn't like every single weekend, you know, since we've been alive, it was racing every single day. But again, that was, you know, my grandfather took my dad, or starting in the 70s. He was in the, you know, Higginbotham fan club and all that everybody talks about back in the day. So yeah, the family is really where racing started for me per se. It wasn't like I met my neighbor down the street and he had some cool car that I like got amazed about one day. But so yeah, that was, you know, Bill Shive. He was, again, Penn Valley Hobby Center owner. He was actually the longest standing sponsor in the Grand Program book for over 40 years. That was actually Ernie Saxon, who used to be the track announcer before Jeff Allen verified that for us the other day. So, yeah, just again, racing's been a lot of family for us, and you know, similar to what you guys got going on.
Yeah.
We weren't. I'm a first generation driver, so it's not like.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you.
Yeah, my grandfather didn't ever get in a car. He was just, you know, he was in like the RC and the toy training business, and a lot of that transfers like from the racing programs in the world. So, again, what I think from, you know, now being a businessman, I see why he did what he did. So that's been, you know, again, like we always keep like his logo on the car somewhere, somehow, some way. Just, you know, again, a memory. But you know, if you ever see like pictures of my shop or something, there's like a big Penn Valley Hobby Center sign. So, but yeah, I mean, again, originally started with family. And you know, I was asking my dad the other day, just like more on the I'm not the greatest on memory, just as far as like, hey, try and give me some facts. And Grandview was like, everything seems to blur together after so many years. But again, it was really family that started it off. And so yeah, my dad went to the track with him years ago. He actually told me the other day it was like Grandview had a rain out one night, and you know, Grandpa always had a 6-pack in the van when he was headed to the track and whatnot. But they had like had a rain out, and they were like, you know, we're not gonna let the night get away. And somehow, some way, this is long before cell phones. You know, everybody had caught wind that they were all going to Flemington, or Flemington was still racing at the time. So everybody like jumped ship to fly down there to go see racing that night. So that's pretty much like the cool story, I would say, of what my dad could recall of. But you know, they used to go as my grandfather and my grandmother. Again, they used to, you know, just take their boy to the track and whatnot. And then, so fast forward, you know, my dad took me when I was 5 years old, per se. That was, you know, again, not every single weekend, but like through the years, you know, through family and whatnot. It was, he actually lived down in Conshohocken for a matter of years. He grew up in Lansdale, so it was like not too far away, but it was enough of an adventure that you like, you know, you had to make a commitment. But they would continue to go out there. He took me as a youngster again, so I can recall like sitting in the stands as just like a teenager, or just, you know, when you're a teenager, obviously racing wasn't everything for everybody in life, but I was always there, don't get me wrong. But again, it was like, hey, I'm, you know, being a teenager doing these things. I wasn't necessarily at the track every Saturday, but I remember those weekends, or, you know, and I had friends that I would go to Grandview with. But you know, again, I think one of my highlights have been more of just like the socialites. So I try and jump around from circle to circle, and you know, just make friends with everybody in a sense. You know, it is how I do business, really. But again, so those years of being a teenager, things like that. But I remember sitting in the stands, you know, watching Jeff and, you know, Craig and Dwayne and Doug and all the big guys per se that just got to mix it up for so many years. And you know, so it's hindsight's always 20/20, but interesting now to be able to, you know, get on the same track with these guys and actually, you know, feel competitive on a good night. So again, just to bring it back family wise, but yeah, he's so we built our first car in 2013, 14, tail end of it was like we were finishing it, and I think we got one or two. It was like we got 1 or 2 nights out of the 13 season, but it was we had a boat anchor of a motor. We had no idea what we were doing. I'm like ready to puke walking in the gates the first day that we went up there on like some piece of junk open trailer, didn't even have any trailer brakes. Like, so yeah, that was, I mean, more family oriented wise, but I was racing dirt bikes for years before I even got into racing. Really, that was. So my dad had helped Cooler years ago. We were just local guys that just knew each other. I think they ran into each other from the gas station or one day or whatever. But again, we did machine work. Same world, of course. But he was like, "Hey, can you build me something? I'm trying to like make up this contraption. It's always about trying to like make something easier or more efficient for you. Like." There's like a couple of things that we have in the shop that I just know that other people don't have, and they walk in my place and they pick that up and they're like, "That's really cool," or useful, you know. So, but again, that was how they got together, and years after years, and eventually my dad was like, "Hey, let's build a car," and I'm like, I'm racing dirt bikes in the middle of it, and I had success. Like I had won some races on the bike, and he was. Talk about sponsors. It was like, my dad, he bought me like a clutch one year. He's like, "I'll be your sponsor." And so, but again, he was like, "Hey, let's build a car." And I'm like, "Sure, go for it." Like he was gonna buy the parts and everything. And I was 23, 24 at the time. So like, and I was, racing out of my own pocket on my bike all the time, working in his shop. And then, all that was like slightly before I made the transition into real estate too. That was like, I got in 2015. So like 13, 14 was like that first year that we actually started racing. 15 we raced, and then like 16 I went through injury, so I was out of that season for a while. But originally was we actually bought a TO from your grandfather, Ray, and with a body on it and nothing attached to it, and we built it piece by piece and made all the wrong moves in racing with that car, a couple other things. But again, that was like the first start of the operation. My dad was over there spray painting fresh body panels. I'm like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, well, that's how you get into it and you start learning everything.
yeah. So that was that was the first runabout of it was an 05 TO. I'll never forget that thing. It was red, and I hated that car. Like there was, I don't know. There was times where, and again, we made all the wrong moves in racing. So it was, just from settings to parts to don't do this, don't do that, don't drive like this, don't drive like that. So that was the big hump that we had to get over those first few years. We didn't catch on I didn't come from karts or anything like that. Again, I was racing dirt bikes and at the time, and he had quads when I was younger. That was like the general gearhead of where we really get it from, really. But again, that was those years were. Sorry, I didn't grow up in karts, or I didn't have any racing experience in a 4-wheel setup. So as we got into it, it was again that TO was just loved racing. Don't get me wrong, and it taught us so much of just like nothing's gonna fall on your lap. Like you're not Stuart Friesen out of the box. Like it just doesn't work to be that way. That you have to learn. And we've only been Grandview racing. Like I raced Diamond I think twice. But other than that, it's like I don't travel for short track super series or anything like that. It's like as cool as it would be. Don't get me wrong, but it's me and my old man. Yeah, not even just like the fuel and the travel and all that. It's just like the biggest thing about our team is like keep it fun, because there's times where like I'm about ready to throw wrenches across the in the shop, and it just like having issues with this or that or the third, or it's like you're trying to get your program together, and I've come to, like, I'll say there's times where we've learned, like, don't do major work on Saturday. Like, if you've broken things, like, make the point to, like, get in early, get your stuff done.
You never know what you're gonna find next.
Yeah. So again, it's like the family side of it is really just me and my dad. Last year the past year and a half, I had a friend of mine, Jake Nolan, helping us out. Sounds like he's skipping out of town for love, of course, but so I'll lose him. But yeah, so, and I was talking to my dad the other day. I'm like, "You ready? Back to you and I, buddy." So, and I remember the first night we won. Steve DeSalvo, no, I'm sorry, it was his dad, was like, all right, where's the crew at? And my dad's just standing there, like, and his son's like, that's the whole team. Like, so
that makes it really tough for you guys. I mean, I know just stepping up to a 2-car team last year, we pretty much had our normal guys, and now we have 2 cars to take care of. At the track, it was just me and my one crew member. Pretty much, it's I understand two people team when one driving. It's rough.
And that's like I'll just say, like, out there, like, for the public, some of these guys that have multiple cars, and like it usually only falls on a couple of people that actually like have to do the work, that are actually writing the checks, that are like actually there to be full supporters. And it's not like I can't ask my friend or my cousin or my aunt or my uncle to like devote their life to my racing and whatnot. So it's,
you gotta have such a next level of love for the sport to be able to commit 1-2 days out of your week, because life is so busy. So
yeah, even just like the people that have to we all got bills to pay.
Yeah,
we all got to keep a roof over our heads. Like you got to keep the wheels turning. So it's like, I'll just say, like, on the backside of racing side of it, like, and I see why guys, like, they just go out on the boat every weekend and just, they don't want to deal with all the madness and the melee. And, again, I'm 32, so it's like, I don't, I'm in the point of my life of where, like, I can do it. I want to do it. It makes you want to do more, obviously, in life, and gives you a point to get up and get after it, of course. Not that I don't have enough, but again, racing is that piece of life that you're like, it's not just gonna fall on your lap. Like, you're gonna have to earn every bit of it, and which I think is enjoyable when you actually get a little. That's it's worse than drugs. Some guys just pick it up and they just can't put it down. Like, and I'm not.
The smell of that racing fuel just hooks you.
Yeah, and I don't race for points. Like, I already know every year there's always going to be like that weekend or two that I'm going to have to, go to a friend's wedding, or have to, like, I just don't want to be able to, like, and we race on our own program, so like I don't have to answer to anybody else writing checks on my cars or anything. Of like, if I want to take a weekend, I can. But again, to reiterate, some of those teams and everything, like, that have 2, 3, I've seen guys that have 4, 5, 6 cars, and there's only a couple of people doing all that work, and it's a lot of work. And to have that kind of an operation is like, you don't want to let that monster consume you. So,
definitely.
Again, hats off to a lot of guys out there, even just like all the people that help on the background side of just even one night a week. Like, one night a week from a friend is just like a blessing in the shop sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like, you're literally just like, your life's just overwhelming, and again, you're like ready to throw wrenches in the shop, like, I'm so over all this. So again, thank you to everybody out there that does throw in a hand, just because it is all very much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of just a little bit that you can get, just an hour, 2 hours out of the day, it may not even be that you need the help. You just need the break of somebody being there to talk to, and hey, this isn't working out. You need a second opinion on something.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Now going back to family real quick.
Sure.
Do you think any of your kids are ever going to get into racing?
Another thing that racing has like been like consumable. So my son, I think, would be, up to the plate if that ever comes to fruition. He's 5. I've not put him in a quarter midget or anything like that. I actually like. A friend of mine basically was like, hey, if anybody wants to take this PW50 for the season, so that nobody's spending a ton of money, like if your kid's gonna catch on or something, feel free. And I'm not the type for like a charity, like, man, please for me. But I reached out to him days later and I was like, hey, did anybody take you up on that? And he was like, no. I was like, you mind if I like try it out with my son? So it kind of caught with him for a little bit, but I'll just be transparent. Like, I just feel like a crappy dad for sometimes not being able to like put enough time into putting him on it. So eventually the bike went back to him. And again, to be transparent, like we've had my son in all kinds of stuff. Like he's been through baseball, swimming, soccer. He's gone through gymnastics at this point. Like it's we keep him very busy, so I don't feel so terrible about like. It's not like he's glued to an iPad every single night at all times, as much as sometimes I hate to say that, like, I just want to throw that thing out the window sometimes. But, again, we try and do our best to keep the kids active and whatnot. So, again, racing for my son, I think, maybe could catch on. Who knows? He doesn't seem to be, like, he enjoys, like, the car and everything like that. The poppy shop where we all hang out and work on the car. Of course, he knows that we put hours in there, of course. But if it ever comes to fruition, great. If it doesn't, I'm not gonna, hate life over it or anything like that. It's kind of, one of my biggest goals in life is just, don't raise a-hole kids. So, as long as he's happy, and if I can give him that opportunity, I gladly will. Right now, I have him. I'm trying to like get him on a 4-wheeler more often, just so he can learn, see a motor, watch wheels turn, and hey, pick up a wrench. You gotta fix a flat tire or something like that. So, my daughter's a year and a half.
Yeah,
who knows? She might be the full force one. I have no idea.
Yeah, you never know. And they're young. They make decisions out of nowhere.
And I won't rule it out either, because like he's all about cars. Like he's got all kinds of cars, and like he lines them all up all over the place, and like I'm like, all right. So I kind of see how it could catch, or we'll see how the correlation goes. But yeah.
So I always am excited to ask people about this, because some people have really good stories. It's just a simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with your number?
Easy one. So again, my dad started the program. It was, I'll say it was his financial obligation early on. And so he has 5 kids. So 5K, 5 kids. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
He was at one point, I think when we were doing it, he was like all amped up. He was training for a 5K. He used to be like, he played soccer and basketball back in the day, so once in a while he gets like that boat going, like, oh, I'm gonna go do this run. I'm like, go for it, dude. But at the time he was like, yeah, we're gonna make the number 5K. Like I got 5 kids, I'm training, running for this 5K thing. I'm like, cool. Like again, he was writing the check, so I couldn't, So again, now the team is, his big stink all the time. He's just like. People are like, oh yeah, let me jump in that car, and he's like, nah, you ain't got the right last name. So again, it's more a family car as we see it. The number kind of stuck. Like I would change the number years ago. Like I used to mess with him all the time. Like I'm gonna change the color, because it's always been red, white, and blue car. Like from every single car that we've ever built, it's always been red, white, and blue. He's I'll just call him the patriotic guy, let's say. So again, it's always been red, white, blue. So I've always been. And for the record, like, my father and I have never had an argument in life until we built a race car. Like, literally. Like, as soon as that car showed up in the shop, it was like, And again, I talk about throwing wrenches and stuff, like, and it's not the frustration of like, you know, I have conflict with my own band or something like that, but he's like, no, I'm gonna do it this way, and I'm like, no, like I'm not doing it. So again, it's
the slow frustrations.
Yeah.
Racing.
And you gotta have so much devotion, like, and
yeah.
And that's like, sometimes we get so torn up, or it's just like I had to play in that weekend. And sometimes it just kind of works out where it's just like, hey, I'm going to take this weekend off. Like, it's already on the schedule or whatever, you know what I mean? So sometimes we kind of try and tailor around, like, we'll kind of work this way out. Hey, we blew up a motor that week. Like, now we got to figure out how we're going to, you know, hey, do we go to the handicap spot before we go away? Like,
yeah.
Or am I going to screw myself and go back another 2 weeks? Like, so that's always, you know, the melee fun. But yeah, anyway, to go back to the number, yeah, 5K, 5 kids, came from my father. If you ever look at our number, there's always 5 stars in it. You know, so he always incorporates that into the number per se for the 5 children, let's say. I have 2 older sisters, Wynn and Sierra. I'm the middle child. He remarried, and I have 2 younger sisters, Jackie and Tori. So there's the 5 of the Shive side.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So,
only boy, by the way.
Yeah.
I did good.
That must have been fun growing up.
Yeah, people talk about being tormented by sisters. I don't even want to hear it because, you know.
You've been through
I've
it.
had my moments, yeah.
So how did the idea of going full-time small block racing come about?
Another easy one. So we raced sportsmen obviously early on. I don't think. Do you know? I'll actually ask you a question. Do you know what was the first year? I meant to actually look on my one shirt that has the Grandview with all the championships on it. I can't remember what was the first year for sportsmen, but just because I think that we weren't many years late into getting into when they started that program. I think.
So I started in 2016.
Yeah, we had a car there in 14 and 13.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 12 maybe.
I think it was like
12,
I almost want to say 12. I know like the first video of anyway. So I think we got into the program not too late. But again, that was so we started racing sportsmen, and we had been in it for what 7, 8 years at that point, something like that. Well, we put a mod motor in that car in the end of 22. So we blew up our last open motor in 22. So that was like the big, because you know it was like everybody. We all know that the crate rule is coming.
Yeah.
Are we gonna spend money on a crate? And like, hey, we're all like a budget team. Don't get me wrong. Like, and the big money teams, don't get me wrong. They have a budget. They have to stick to it. They have to sit down and actually like break down what they're gonna spend. So we were faced with the decision of like, do we put our money into crate racing, or do we go to racing small block at Grandview? So that was like the easy, you know, it was an easy decision for us because we were like, when's going to be the time, really?
Yes.
We had a couple of wins in sportsmen, so we, you know, him and I looked at each other. We at least felt credible. Like, hey, let's try our hand with an open motor, or I'm sorry, a small block motor, which is, you know, we only run specs over there. But yeah, it was pretty much like, I'm not interested in, you know, we ran an open motor since day one. I never raced a crate. Nothing against it or per se, but I was like, hey, I'd rather put more power in my car necessarily than, you know, consider going crate racing. I know what both divisions look like. We felt that it was more prosperous for us to, again, just looking at like payouts, things like that. Sometimes you only need a little bit of luck. You know,
that the payout thing is a huge difference.
Oh, dude, like the first, it's Bruce Rogers is the first one, the moneymaker.
$1,000 to take.
$1,000 to get in.
That's more than a win.
Oh my gosh! And we like, I forget exactly. I just remember like we didn't make the show and it was like the car count was so low. I'm pretty sure we broke. But again, it was so frustrating because we were like, we had a little bit of luck and we just totally like we were getting in. It was an easy $1,000. You know what I mean? I was like, it's an easy paycheck. I was actually surprised that like we didn't have a huge car count for that one.
Yeah.
And it was. I just remember it was 22. It was that first time that we were like, all right, we're coming up here as a contender on a weekly basis. I had actually bought a steelhead motor off another crate guy. Actually, he was just never going to do anything with it. That was in. Okay, so I'll back up. 22. We had ran open motors. We blew one up early in the year, and then we ran our backup motor till the end of the year, and that was what. Once we blew up our backup motor, we were like, we're out of heads, we're out of blocks, like we're out of everything. We're like it was like, how many bombs can you finally build before you're out of parts? So again, that was the decision of, and we had gotten a good deal on this, steelhead modified motor. I was like, I don't care even if we use the bottom end, just the block, he was just trying to get it out of his way. So he was like, hey, a couple grand, here you go. We were like, cool. At least it'll be something of use one way or another. We put that motor together. It was like somebody Frankensteined it. I mean, it looked pretty good from what we could tell, but again, once you finally like broke it apart, and we had an issue with it. It basically blew up on the stand. And another thing that me and my dad have he's a procrastinator. So am I. Don't get me wrong, but on the racing side, I try not to be. And it's like November. I'm like, yo, we got to get that motor out. Like, we got to get that thing running. So anyway, we had that motor that we blew up. I'm sorry, I'll try and bring this together better. So we blew up our last open motor. We had a friend, another local motor builder, who was like, hey, if you want to try out, he's had it sitting on his floor for years, and was like, I think he was just curious to like see if it was going to be good or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin Herthard actually ran it for a little bit of time. He gave his feedback on it. We ran it for a couple of races, and basically was like, hey, run it for a couple of races. We had that other motor sitting on the floor. Hey, I just got to piece it together. I got to do a couple of things with it. So again, that was just like, drop this one right in, so you don't necessarily have to worry about tearing down what you have. So we ran that one for a little bit of time, and we could tell that it was like, I'll say it was an older spec style motor, basically. So it was, to what they're building now, motor spec small block wise, is to the extreme of what they're allowed in the rules compared to like what the older motors were set up as, we'll call as the, older spec small blocks. So that was, we ran the donor motor after we blew up our last Sportsman motor. Off season came. I was chewing on my old man. Hey, let's get that other motor out. We got to get it going. It's like March. Finally get it in. Finally fire it. Blows up on the stand. I'm like, well. So we went back, borrowed the donor motor again, ran that. Realized that we were just, I'm pouring money into, tires, shocks, wearable items, body panels, and it was like I took my handicap up front and ended up out back just because like we just didn't have enough juice. Yeah. We greatly appreciated somebody hooking us up as far as getting something going on motor program wise, but we finally were like, we're gonna park this operation until we put a competitive motor in the car. And then that was, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 weeks into the 23 season. Myers built us another motor after a few weeks off, I'll say. Took our spots out back. We actually won a couple of heat races last year with that motor. But again, it was like we had put a fresh motor in when most of the guys already have half a season, even if their stuff was fresh at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So, it's like that we've always, I'm not going to say we've like played that end of it, but it's always like we'll put a fresh motor in halfway through the season to try and like spice it up a little bit to see if we have, or to try and give ourselves a competitive advantage if we can. so I don't seem to come out incredibly strong early on sometimes, and then it's like, oh, all of a sudden now we got fresh stuff. Now we can get to the front. So
coming on.
Again, just maybe part of the game, but yeah, that was how we got into open small block, going from sportsman. Really.
Yeah. Now, did anything surprise you going into the season that was a lot different from running the sportsman side?
I mean, I had obviously asked around to, people like, hey, that had made the transition, like, anything crazy, expectations, good, bad, pros, cons, whatever, and to my understanding, everybody pretty much broke it down to, like, it's a half a second faster, on a lap time. That seems to be about what it averages out to. It's a little bit more power, so you can. Some people like to say that, like, you can get yourself out of trouble with a little bit more power. I still think it's kind of like
you get yourself out of trouble, but you also can get into trouble quicker.
So, again, I'll say spec small block is like, we don't run open small blocks or big blocks at Grandview, obviously, but I still think it's hammer down racing. Really, like, it's not like you're not giving that. Everybody's giving that motor everything they possibly can at Grandview. I don't care what you're racing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, I think that there is a little bit more power, but per se that, like, I think the talent is much better. So I think the rough riding is a little bit less. I mean, if you look at sportsman compared to modifieds, it's like, once sportsman guys are getting into it, it's like everybody just wants to just start duking it out, and like, and I've been there. It's like, and there's times where, like, there's nothing you can do. You're in the middle of it. You got to go with what you got in front of you anyway. Like, everybody's along for the ride in that back. Like, when there's 6-7 guys all jumping in there for third, you're like, all right, I hope he doesn't blow a tire, because he's gonna destroy everybody else. And guess what? Oh, there goes the wheel flying. Like,
most of the guys in modifieds, they're not new at this. They have a couple years under their belt.
Yes.
So with the way the handicap system works, the guys that haven't been running as long and they needed a few weeks to learn, they're the ones starting up front in the sportsmen's. So when the faster guys are getting to them, and or I shouldn't even say faster, right? The guys that have more experience, they get to them, and then they get nervous in the car or something like that, and it's the sportsman division is definitely a lot different than modified. We'll call it that.
And also, like, I know that, like, if you look in years, that's why they enacted the rule that, like, no modified drivers for 38er. Because you get guys that jump in a really nicely set up sportsman car. And the whole thing about sportsman is it's an entry level. It's supposed to be more budget friendly than a modified. Nothing's cheap in racing, don't get me wrong, but so again, sportsman is meant to, you're going to get those you're going to get a 16-year-old kid that is going to door you. You know what I mean? Like, he is literally going to drive into you on throttle, and, like, what are you going to do? Maybe he got angry because somebody bumped him and you just happened to be there, so now he's driving through you. It's like, and I'm not saying that's the case. Like, Grandview, for the most part, it's exciting racing because it's not a big track. It's not insanely wide.
Door banging, no matter what.
Like, I was watching, like, Jared Higbee was on the other channel, Third Track Untold, but they were, just to see what those guys talk about, and, like, he says the same thing, that, like, it's just, the crate racing side of it is just, like, it's just wild. And but again, like, the bull ring side of it at Grandview is just, like, it's always, what Jerry was talking about really was, like, people come to pay to see the danger. Like, they want to see the on the edge of, like,
absolutely.
Do you see a car flying up in the air? Like, I've seen it happen. It's like.
And honestly, this the last 2 years, just before I got back into the sportsman division, I kind of was watching with my brother and all my friends that are running it. The last 2 years, the sportsman division have been putting on a hell of a show.
Yes,
they are.
Agreed.
Yes, they're banging wheels. There definitely are more accidents than the modifieds. But a lot of times,
there's some nice they go green.
Exactly.
And modifieds are a mess.
It don't matter age, experience. it can be a wreck fest, and I've been
Why
noticing
Granby's
a lot.
fun?
Well, I've been noticing a lot at other tracks. Like
Yeah.
it's wreck fest,
Yeah.
but it's exciting, and there's a lot of for me the crate division. I've been watching since everybody's kind of equal.
Yeah.
Anybody can win.
Exactly.
It's a Grandview. I'm not. I don't know the stats, but I don't think many people had multiple wins this year in the crate division. The modified ranks.
I think Logan
Even-
did. I'm sure. I mean, he was. Hey.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah,
than
good
that, though, I think that there wasn't. I think Brian had a couple of wins, but again, it wasn't like there was one guy that.
Yeah, it
dominated.
wasn't like previous years back.
Yeah, like
when
when Jared and
Roman
Brett
Howard-
were winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, dude, those guys. It was like, all right, who's gonna finish third tonight?
Yeah.
Like,
For 2-3 years, we
yeah.
knew who was going to win pretty much every
Yeah.
week. It's
And
exciting.
Exactly. So it's to see it change year to year is definitely good.
Yeah.
I think it's good for the sport. Period.
So now that we're kind of into that topic,
Yeah.
like, we have a lot of the sportsman guys moving up to the modified this year. I know. I heard
Great.
Kyle Smith is coming up. Now he's ran a bunch of.
Yeah, Kyle should have been in there anyway.
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys moving up to the
Well,
modified division.
He did pretty good. I remember seeing Kyle up on a top one night, like in like a consi, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" Again, the sportsman guys, because like sometimes you got to get creative in that division, and then there goes Kyle right out on the top. Everybody's just soaking the bottom, and he just goes flying past. We're like, "That's the sportsman guy."
Yeah. It's a cool deal when you get to see younger people like that move up in the division.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice or maybe something they should know moving up to the modified ranks for a full year since you just came out of it?
Yeah. Get ready for that shop time.
More hours.
That's like, if I can take anything from the bigger programs that I've seen, like it's all maintenance, like making sure that car is, and that's why some of these bigger teams can. I'm not gonna say they're gonna be super successful or like they're always going to have success, is because like usually they have 2 or 3. Sometimes these teams have 2 or 3 guys that like they're stripping that car down and everything is fully greased, like. Shocks are going over every single race. Like, I've even seen, there's plenty of top guys out there. Like they have a heat race shock. They have a feature shock. They, something and a couple of varieties in between to play with. So it's like, again, the transition for the sportsman guys to the small block side are moving up. If we're talking Grandview specific, it sounds like. I think great. It's only going to elevate the whole field. I think, just as far as car count.
You think
Now
we're
that they're
gonna have
gonna-
big car counts.
That's the hope. But it more just breaks down to, I think, the crate guys now that it's like, I feel like the consensus in the past few years, like while open motors were still very competitive or were usable, there was a lot of out of town crate guys that are like, no, I'm not going that Grandview. Like I know I know what it's like, and hearing from other guys at other tracks, they're like, yeah, like Grandview is not for the faint of heart. Like don't go down there thinking you're going to boost your ego or anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that that has somewhat deterred some of the out of town guys that have crate cars. But again, like to elevate the sport as a whole, I think you're going to see more crate cars come to Grandview per se, because it's good payout, it's good racing, it's local. We definitely seem to be more in the middle of like I feel like Diamond is like up there, so they have like their own little group that's pretty local to them. Grandview here, we're closer to more of like some of the Jersey tracks, so some guys can make that travel. But yeah, crate guys or sportsman guys moving up to small block, to reiterate, time in the shop, it's a lot of maintenance programs. But I will say that there's plenty of guys that have a crate car. They can go dump a small block in and it's the same setup. Like there's no major difference. I know there's some technicalities now as far as it, you can only run a single spring on a left rear shock for a crate, but other than that, like there's really not a huge amount of difference as far as and there's guys that do it. They pull, obviously it's a different setup, car to small block to crate, I would think, to be competitive. But again, I think it's the same car, it's the same chassis, it's the same suspension usually. I know that the crate guys like that little 8-inch rear thing, but I've heard that might not stand the abuse. Maybe a spec small block for not a prolonged period of time, but I don't know.
Do you have any? I know we just talked about it, how being a small team and definitely I'll call it underfunded because we got so much money that needs to go out, but not enough money coming in.
What do we call it? Over budgeted?
Exactly. Do you have any sponsors or any backing you would just want to give some thanks to? Anybody?
Yeah, just so I can remember these off the top of my
head.
You're
good.
Yeah. No, I did have this, and I always like to keep my notes.
Yeah, you got so many people.
My bigger sponsor starting at the top. Remax Reliance is my big one. My broker, where I obviously do business out of. Titanium Finishing is our big one. Tim and Melanie, they've been on since early on. They just like to support a local team. Great people. Atkinson Auto Works, he's local actually over in Gilbertsville. He's an auto mechanic shop. He was best man at my wedding actually. He's a dear friend, of course. DLC Excavation, he's jumping on this year. He was a recent client, good guy. Also does basement waterproofing if anybody needs a vendor out there for that. Roddy Landscaping, again another longtime childhood friend of mine, Andrew. IRT is my dad's company. We like to think that our sponsors are irrelevant our own selves, but they are relative, of course. And our last couple of vendors, Fast Four Ration Socks, 4-star lettering. They hook us up, make sure that we get to the track every year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're gonna take a break and then we'll be right back. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. So we'll start this off by Bailey Fabrications, the sponsor for today's episode. We want to thank them for everything. Again, if you need any body work or a complete body, he's probably the cheapest around. If you need anything for the low budget guys or even the big team guys, he makes a good body. Check out mine or Decker's body. You can definitely get what you're looking for. So basically, for this podcast, I always like to get into technical questions and everything like that, and since I figured we're coming up with the new title for everything, I figured it would only be fitting to make our technical questions proper names. So we're going to call our technical questions the Dirt Dynamics. So let's get right into it. I know you touched on this a little bit, but we want to just know a little bit, since you just moved into the modified ranks. Give me a list of things that you either changed or thought you would need to change moving into the modifieds, and the things that maybe you did change. Did it actually help, or are there other things that you didn't change that maybe you do need to change yet?
I mean, so I think what Grandview takes is let's say a pretty broad card, because there's some guys that like something very specific, and there's some guys that like something that's on the complete opposite end, and they could both win. Like there's no one perfect car at Grandview on any given night. Like that's for sure. So as far as like the sportsman car versus a modified, or let's say spec small block, they I ran like both nights we won. I was on a J bar. I wasn't on short rods and coils and a left side bar. So there's a lot of open ended setups, I think, that can be competitive there. That's like what I think is probably one of the better things about Grandview. Like when you start going out to like these bigger, wider tracks, it's like everybody's got pretty much the same setup. So again, like you can see a torsion bar car win versus a coil car, and it all kind of.
Grandview is kind of the last place that still happens.
Yeah, literally. So again, why I think that there's obviously a lot of magic in that place. But again, there's guys that are on what I would ultimately like to anybody off the street that's like, hey, what is the most preferred setup if like, let's say if you had an unlimited budget, short rods on coils with a healthy motor is probably cream of the crop of what you would need from a base standpoint. I would say at Grandview. Is there guys like Craig Von Doren that went on a torsion bar car in the past year or two? Yeah. Are you Craig Von Doren? Probably not. But again, there's guys that I think can, a long rod on the left or a short rod on the left, coils versus bars. There's. I think the setups are at this point, the way that the track is, shape, setup, and everything. It can be pretty versatile, but there's guys that have old stuff that they're probably going to have a tough time transitioning into a modified from, the old beat up equipment, and they just, even just like the transmissions are updated. They, the Gen 2 versus the Gen 1, I know it gives you less drag. So it's like right then and there, there's, even on a used one, you're going to spend, what, $1,600, $1,800?
Yeah, they're expensive.
I'm sure new, they're obviously more than that, but I mean, you want to talk about parts as far as like a half box versus a full box, like, now you're going to get into what floor do you have in your car that's going to, allow that car to, properly flex, let's say, at any given point on the track, like, and there's guys that have a better car for heat, and there's guys that have a better car for feature, and our consensus is like, you got to get through the heat to get to the feature, obviously. So that's, I think, the first challenge that people have to get through. So again, I think that obviously feature is where people get paid, but so to back up to crate versus open or spec small block, I think there's some guys that'll have an easier transition that already have probably the latest and greatest of parts, and I mean, even just like keeping good tires on there. Maybe not like sometimes. I'll just say like sometimes not a brand new tire for heat race might make you a little bit free sometimes. Might be prosperous for a lot of people out there at Grandview that just they're going in there in the heat race and they're just dump trucking the thing and they're hitting the guy on the top that's starting on the outside. It's like,
yeah,
maybe a little trick of the trade might help there a little bit. So not everything matters. And there's guys that I've seen up there that I won't say that have the best of the best equipment that can still do really well. Have they been driving for a while? Probably. Skill does go, a ways at Grandview, I'll say. But for the general consensus, I don't think there's nothing cheap about racing, either which way you look at it. Like, you're swapping out parts. I don't care if you're looking at racing with like, I'm gonna have this crate car with these parts on it, and it's gonna last me 10 years. It is not going to be the case, and you're in for a rude awakening. But the way that the prices are of things and like that, like, it's why it's great to go and find sponsors to be able to fund when you go from a crate to a modified, let's say. So again, it takes money. Like, let's not sugarcoat that to anybody. Like, this racing program, nothing is free. Like, literally, the fuel to get to the track ain't cheap. Like, just to get in the door. But again, everybody has their, I don't know. Some teams have more to spend. Some teams have less. Obviously, I'm not going to say an unlimited budget is the best, of course. I mean, there was a video I saw the one guy, I hate to say it, I think it was probably a TikTok I saw, but there was it was one of the guys, it was about the Daytona 500, and he was like, this car made it on the the front couple rows at Daytona 500, and like he was like, it was a normal, like, it wasn't no $1 million operation everywhere. He had like a couple of odds and end cars and like some old school tools in there per se, but like, again, even at like, let's just say the heap of the pile, it doesn't take every single brand new part and every shiny piece on your car. Because there's guys that go up there that got brand new cars. Hey, you call up Bicknell and say, I want this, drop it off my doorstep, shocks, tires, the whole 9 yards, and call Gary Butler. I'll go pick it up for you. I always see him going back to Bicknell. So I know that if you're able to write those checks, those things are possible. But again, to say like those guys can bring that car up there and barrel roll that thing in the first race. Not saying I don't wish that upon anybody, but I've seen guys that bring brand new cars up there and destroy them in one night, and it sucks. Like tearing up equipment is not part of anybody's fun. Like, so yeah, again, just the transition can be easy, can be hard. Let's say sometimes I'll say usually it can break down the money.
So you, to clarify, you don't really think there's that much on these cars that need to be changed over from a sportsman to a modified, from your experience?
Yeah, like I think a competitive sportsman car in today's world, I think you only got to swap out some parts. Is it going to cost you a couple $1,000? Probably. It seems like every 2 feet on that car, it costs you a couple $1,000 one way or the other.
Yeah. So just to get into those parts a little bit, I'm not. So you're on coils.
Yep.
Okay. So not including the coil springs or anything right now, but you said that you're running with Fast Four racing shocks now.
Yeah.
And everything. Do you think the shocks themselves? Because I know he probably did your shocks.
Yeah.
And your springs and everything. Do you think the shocks themselves really made a difference from what you had? I mean, I don't know what you had before, but do you think those are really important?
I mean,
now that you're stepping up into the modified ranks?
Yeah, there's guys that there's plenty of shock vendors out there. I mean, your big ones, obviously, Penske, Integra. There's big body Bilsteins out there. Dig shocks are, a nice Fast Four. Actually, Ron did the coil seminar for them at Motorsports this past year. So it's, I will say, if you want to be competitive and, you're looking for that little bit more, start doing your research and start looking at what some of these other guys are doing about suspension, because I think that's where a lot of the fruit is, or else I should say low-hanging fruit for a lot of teams that, just because like just going back to cars or coils versus bars, like I feel like your window of opportunity in a bar car is like this big, and your opportunity in a coil car is more like this big. But when you can find a good setup within that realm, like the car is a rocket. Like you always want to have that car that you feel like it just drives itself. Like that's the whole. Like, you're gonna talk about setup and this and that and the third. Like, you literally want to have that car so dialed in that it literally just drives itself around by itself, almost. Like, all you gotta do is just make sure that you're feeding the throttle.
Yeah.
So that's
So you updated your motor program this year and everything like that. I just want to talk to you a little bit about maybe your maintenance for your motor and stuff like that. Is the carburetor maintenance more important with changed power valves, jettings, or anything like that? And just explain it to the people that are watching a little bit about all that stuff. What is it? And
sure. I'll say what's in front of the motor plate at this point, because it can get pricey, again, inch by inch. There's, I think both will apply, let's say, crate versus spec, but I know that the crate guys, I'll be honest, I can't really touch a whole lot on crate side of it. I'm sure other guys, I know everybody's like, you got to change valve springs every other race and things like that. So
you're not doing that with the modified.
Obviously, so that's something that, again, I can't really give a whole lot of experience on. But as far as like our motor programs, again, I ran open sportsman motors, and now we've moved on to spec small blocks. It's just been more. I mean, the spec small block stuff is. Let's just cover that to start. Let's say.
Yeah.
The spec small block stuff it's a much more pricier motor.
Side note, I wish there was a little bit more option out there in the world, just because, like, I'm not gonna say like I'm a junkyard fan, but like I've seen what some of these guys are doing with like Chevy LS motors, like on a budget, and they make wild power.
Yeah.
Like, you can even see that in the open stuff that they kind of transition and play a little bit out of their rule book. But anyway, to back up to spec small block, maintenance programs, things like that, as far as, you know, within your motor. I mean, the typical stuff is like you change your oil every other. We add a quart in between. Let's say usually about each that quart. Doing valve lash is important. I think that's where I think a lot of guys would probably be able to get a little bit more longevity out of their motors versus, and some guys just don't know. You know, they're writing a $30,000 check to, you know, some of these big name engine builders, and you know they're like, all right, cool, it's gonna hold together forever, and they blow it up, and you know half a season later, and I'm not gonna say I feel bad for some of the motor builder guys, but like I know what it's like to be able to you know, be inside of motors, build motors, and once one of them lets go, it's like you can't say that it was like the guy who put it together's fault. Like, you know, unless that thing blows up on the stand, generally they did their job. So again, it's like the simple maintenance stuff is, you know, just oil changes. Carburetor, I would say, is not, you know, an every weekend item. I do think that your carburetor should be gone over multiple times a season. And when I say that, you know, depending on how much you run, like there's some guys that run some weeks 2 or 3 nights in a week. You know, I only run Grandview at most once a week. You know, now that we're stepping up the small block, maybe, you know, that Tuesday show and things like that, but like, who knows, maybe that'll play into my favor of like, I'll go race that Tuesday and I'll take that weekend off. But again, motor maintenance wise, most of the big ticket bill items you're usually paying for up front when you put it in there and install as new or fresh or updated, whatever. But again, just like your simple maintenance stuff like that. But usually, I mean, to dive into the more longevity side of it, your heads are going to be your next, you know, your first big piece of it. I've learned that, you know, new heads are definitely preferred versus something that's been cut up a few times. Can they be competitive? Will you see a difference? I think there's a little bit of yes and no in both of that. But again, it's really how much you want to spend too. Again, like I'm a budget guy. I will say I only put quality stuff on my car. I buy new parts, I buy used parts. Like sometimes it all kind of depends on how things fall. Is it something that I know that's just gonna get smashed off the car again? Like, you know, kind of determines like which direction you want to go in.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm not the type to call Big Nell and say, hey, you know, send me a brand new body panel or, you know, a full body by part number. You know what I mean? Like I know what that bill is, and it's just not prosperous for a small team like myself. But again, to back up to motor maintenance, again, spec small block SWAT side, I think, again, most of your stuff is written up front. And again, like I buy quality parts. Like if there's something on the shelf that's $20 and then there's, you know, it's expected to last 2 years, and then there's a part on the shelf that lasts, you know, 6 to 7 years, it's $50, I'll go spend the $50. I'm just, you know, not that I'm always like, hey, I'm just gonna buy something that's more expensive just because, but like I've played both sides of it. I've built a car piece by piece out of used parts, and I know what it costs you as far as racing, and I know what it, you know, I know the amount of frustration that like we ran. I'll even say I had this experience this past year. This past year. That was Forrest Rogers Memorial, and we were inside a top 10, and my it was a right front shock. Left. It was a right front shock. Literally, I just saw the tower just like fall over. Like the clip we had smashed that car out a couple of times that it had been welded on a few times, so that was again sometimes the frustration of like sometimes you just have a part failure. So new versus used, I will say even on the motor department side, it's kind of like, you know, what fits your budget. But again, the spec side, I think, is a lot of it. Those motors are meant to last a little bit longer versus, like, I'm not going to say crates or throwaways, but there's more vigorous, less expensive maintenance, I think, that go into a crate versus, like, spec side that they seem to last a little bit longer. You can get a little bit more time out of a spec versus, like, what we had in open motors. We found that about every 8 races, we were going to pull top end off. We were finding that was about the happy medium of where, like, we were getting to the point to where it was going to blow up because we were not, having those heads redecked or anything, just to be able to, like, stay in spec and whatnot. And I'll say, side note, the open motors, we were, like, I'll say a lot of the sauce was, like, getting compression out of them. So, again, you were building more of a bomb than, let's say, a spec small block in today's world. Power-wise, I think a spec small block does a lot of the same thing. Obviously, there are set rules that you're allowed to do with those motors, and a lot of the guys that will sell you a premier motor, I know, are setting those things more on the extreme side. Does it take away from longevity? Yeah. Is there some guys that just, they got a guy who's going to go and buy 2 or 3 motors at a time? Go for it. Like, it's a matter of what you got.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into a topic that we haven't.
Oh, hold on. Air filters. Big on the air
absolutely.
filters.
That's
Big on the air filters. If you're not cleaning your air filter every race, you are doing yourself a major disservice. You would rather suck oil than dirt.
Yeah.
Literally.
That's
So if you ever question when you're in there, like, painting your filter down, just remember, oil filter is less expensive than motors.
Yeah, that's 100%. That was a good thing to bring up.
It's like an air fuel ratio. Like, do you got too much oil? Do you got too much dirt? I'd rather be on the rich side. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
So, again, that's like, I will say, I'll leave it on motor maintenance on that's probably one of the biggest things that I harp to people about. Just like again, spark plugs. Sorry, I'll finish.
Oh,
on
you're
that,
good.
but
You're good.
Again, just like those wearable items that, like, spark plugs, air filter. Again, carb maintenance every, a couple times a year. Again, I don't think your carb is necessary for every single race, depending on, you use whatever. But yeah. Gotta keep it clean.
This is the kind of stuff I want to bring to the people that are going to see this attention, because a lot of people are sitting in the stands and they don't know what's going on outside. I want them to know, like, hey, these are the things we're doing in the shop. We are making sure that your carburetor, you might pull out the jets and clean them or something like that, put different ones in, because when the temperature outside changes, you might need to change the jetting a little bit to a higher or lower number jetting, depending on temperature wise. And it's just, you gotta, like,
carburetors are more my old man.
Yeah.
He handles more on the carbs. I don't necessarily play with jets more than he does, or like whoever I'm having servicing it is pretty much like, we try and trust the experts in that. I'm not building carburetors.
Me too. I'm not touching any of that stuff. There's people that know what they're doing well, and I let them do it because I don't want to.
Yep.
We got enough stuff going on, setting up the car and stuff like that. I want to focus my time on that, and I don't want to. The motor, I don't even deal with. I don't want to deal with it. I put it in. I change the oil, spark plugs, and everything.
Yep.
But I call somebody. It doesn't even have to be the motor builder per se. I just trust. There's a few people I trust. Like, I know that Mark Malcolm. He raced a couple times this year. He does my valve springs. He changes them. I don't even want to change them. I don't want to know how to do it. It's just because I trust him. He is the only guy I will let change valve springs on my cars, because
I like Marty.
He knows what he's doing. He's very particular. He knows he's doing it right, and it sometimes it takes him a little bit longer than probably some people, but that's the guy I want. I want the guy that's going to make sure it's 100%. I've never had an issue, and that's it, like you're saying. There's so much money we're dumping into these motors. And mine are just crates. So it's only a fraction of what those.
It's all relative. Like,
we're up to brand new motors, like $15,000 now, carb to pan.
Oh my god! Like, nothing's cheap. Nothing is cheap in racing. You
So
want to make a small fortune in racing, start with a big one.
Exactly. But so now I want to get into a topic, since it's our turf dynamics, and we have not covered it yet. I know it's only the 3rd episode, but I feel like we've covered a lot of what's going on with the race car and stuff. But one thing nobody really talks about is the fuel.
Mhm.
There's so many different types of fuels out there, and can you explain a little bit of a difference and what maybe you run into the modified? I mean, I'll just list them here. You start out with your normal pump gas, and then for the crate wise, we can either mix, which means we choose one of the higher octanes. So the higher octanes are 98, 110, 112, 114. So you just take one of those fuel and maybe 50-50 mix or whatever you feel is good. I mean, it's really up to you, and mix that with pump gas.
Yeah.
What do you think is the difference and benefits of the higher octanes, maybe to the lesser octanes?
Yeah.
Is there a point where you're just wasting money and
Yeah.
it's not burning at all?
Yes, and like I remember going through this, like even on like the dirt bike side of things, of just trying to squeeze everything you can out of a motor, but there's optimum octane rating for how your motor is set up. So this is like my basic understanding of motors, or that I at least would explain. So again, like your weed whacker runs just fine on premium. It's not like crazy compression. It's not insanely tight tolerances. It's not building a ton of heat. That's another thing that, like, when you're dealing with race motors, you are stressing that thing, to the limit. And like, just to even touch on stuff like that, like you should be cleaning your radiator out very frequently, because that's
every time you wash it off.
Yeah, like the more, so again, like your octane rating does matter, of like how much, when people talk about motors and they talk about detonation, the more heat you're putting into that motor, you're detonating that motor, is basically the rundown of it. So again, like a crate, I know that you can, as I would say, versus like what we ran as an open motor, was an open motor, we were trying to squeeze every bit of compression we can out of that. So with saying more compression, there's basically, let's say like a crate motor has this much, free give of tolerances in there, and an open motor is, a little bit tighter per se, like this. So it takes a little bit of a different application versus fuel. So I'm going to make I'm making as much heat in this combustion chamber versus where he's got this much more. So his optimum rating is, he might be able to go a little bit longer and be able to keep a cooler motor, versus where I'm, basically heating the bomb up over there per se in an open motor. So again, the only real correlation I can really come up with on it. But so again, like, and I'll say to spec small block, it's really about heat. Now that you're making more horsepower, let's say bigger, obviously bigger chambers, bigger cams, more volume of fuel, you are going to create more heat. So again, the gist of running, pump gas at 93, and you mix it with 110 or something, say you're ending up like 97, 98, as you have like listed in there, is like that pre-mix is what they call it, let's say. That gives them that optimum rating. And don't get me wrong, like if you're not making enough, everybody talks about the EGT, or exhaust gas temperatures, which is like that perfect air fuel ratio. It's always about finding that optimum setup, and hence why, like, you change jets, you put bigger jets in when you want to feed it more fuel for whatever reason, or you want to take fuel away because you're just flooding it, and it's just like a dog on the start because you're just pumping too much through it. And side note, like, even when you see like a car pull off the track, like he'll be hammered down all of a sudden, and then like I do this all the time. Not all the time, but like if you see me, running an all out lap, and then all of a sudden you just see me stop in the middle of the track and they push me in, everybody's going for a plug check. What is that? You pull that spark plug out when it was at optimum, full throttle, to see what the spark plug in, a carbureted vehicle, that's like our only telltale sign to figure out what it is. They don't give us ability to have, monitor those things, let's say. So again, it's like, that's your telltale of like, can I put more heat to it? Do I take heat away by adjusting fuel? things like that. So again, it's like, and that's where I think a lot of guys, let's say like, you know, the guys that are real in tune about playing with carburetors all the time, things like that. And sometimes it works out for them, sometimes it bites them in the ass, I think, because they're just like, maybe they're playing around a little too much, you know, and I'm not going to say that I'm victim to that, but I've also seen how some guys that like, sometimes the ones that have problems are the guys that are constantly over there playing with stuff. And I'm like, sometimes you want the set it and forget it thing. And I will say, like, at Grandview, we only get so much time from heat to, you know, hopefully you're staying out of consi to feature, like, the time that we have. And I will say, even just, like, as a small team, I barely have time to be able to, like, move a tire, like, and swap, like, a couple of, like, adjustable parts. Like, even for me to just, like, pull the shock on and off and swap tires, move a bar, this and that, like, I'm out of time. Like, that's and that, like, that's me, like, being efficient, getting out of the car, swapping tires, fuel, getting everything ready, prepped, and, like, you know, God forbid I gotta put tear offs on. You know what I mean? So it's like, as a smaller team, sometimes that's where those advantages, I think, can happen, if needed. I mean, I've seen Jeff Strunk pull in one night with a completely torn out rear end, and like they were in there like, and he went back out because there was like, it was a long red, like, you know, like if my car got torn up like that and I came in on the hook, I'm like, I'm pulling it in, put it on a jack stand, I'm done. Like I don't even think let alone if I have the extra parts in the trailer to do so. So
last year I told my guys, if I come in with a flat, don't even bother. We ain't changing anything.
It's like, and sometimes it's just that luck. But
that is a good thing about Grandview, just to, or racing in general, just to throw this out there. Like the guys we have at the track, it's not even our crew members. The guys that
we
care about racing. Yeah, you guys. Like I know, I came in, I was done. I came in with a flat, I was done. I came in.
10 guys
there were
running.
10 guys, exactly. There's
Come
10
on,
guys there.
Come on, we'll fix it. You got a shock over there? Give it to me.
I had a right rear flat. I pulled in. I forget everybody. I know Joey Vaquero was there. Let me tell you, that tire was changed so fast, and I was back out there. I didn't even have a tire. They ran over to my brother's trailer and grabbed a tire off the rack. I think it at least was my brother's, and threw it on there. It might not, but that's the kind of people that we race with. That the love for their sport that everybody has, and anybody will lend a helping hand. I mean, it don't matter if you guys wrecked the week before. Most guys, as long as it wasn't felt it was intentional, well, most guys still throw a helping hand, and we appreciate the people like that, and especially the guys that aren't driving, that just come to because they love the sport and they want to be there to throw a helping hand. We always appreciate that.
Racing is racing. There's always gonna be somebody in the pits who's like, and again, why I think racing is addicting for most people, but and it's like, a lot of it is human interaction. Just that there's a guy that will literally door you the week before, maybe even completely wreck your car, but you know, you were in Consi, you got flat, and you still got a chance to come out there, and you saw him as he was finishing up his car. He comes running with one of his tires to throw it on there for you, and you're like, all right, there's still like, you know, there's still admirable people out there in the world. So
that's the love of this sport for everybody.
100%.
It is the people that really, for me, like I love racing and everything, but it's the people that keep bringing me back to everything after years of bad luck. It really, I'm gonna be honest. I've been at my
years of frustration.
Yeah,
oh my god,
blowing 5 motors up in 1 year. That was me ready to give up, but we're still coming back every year, and it's really not because of racing anymore. It's because of the people. I don't know what else I would do.
Yeah, it takes a village. Like there's no, you know, even if there is 1 or 2 guys, like don't get me wrong, it takes a village. Like you know, but just my in-laws like taking my kids for a few hours so I can go work on the car. Like, you know, so you can try and not be a crappy. So again, there's it takes a village even when it is, you know, a small operation, let's say.
Yeah. All right, so we're geez, can't even talk today. We're rounding out the end of this episode. I want to give a big thank you to Bailey Fabrication for sponsoring this. Give him a call if you need anything, any fabrication. He's the guy to go to. So lastly, we're gonna enter our new segment called the Speed Zone.
Oh boy.
So this last segment, what's that?
So
The last segment is just where I want to allow you to share some stories. I mean, give us a story. Tell our guests out there that are going to be watching just anything.
As far as stories,
Yeah, anything. It don't matter. It can be about racing. It don't even have to be about racing. Just give them something.
That's fine. I mean, I'll give you racing. I mean, we're here for racing, of course.
Yeah, of course.
I'll give you probably like two of my bigger. Like our first win. I'll give you two stories. Like our first win, and then probably like my recent like most interesting time in Spec Small Block recently. I'll describe. But to start, I think our first win was probably like the most memorable thing for us. Obviously, everybody and. Again, hats off to the sportsman guys or even the modified guys that just like that haven't. We all go up there to win. Like where nobody wants to go and pull in the gate and come in there for second. Like we all want to go up there to win. Don't get me wrong. It's not like hey, I'm winning. Like oh no, it's okay, Craig. Just keep coming. I'll let you go. Like no, everybody wants to win. So again, hats off to the guys that continue to show up for the sport and strive for that first win, even if they don't have one. Because trust me, I was there for a long time. But again, our first win was probably the most memorable thing for us, just because it was it was actually one of the bigger money races too. I remember the one of our track friends. He came up after the race. It was I don't know the following race or something. He's like, oh, like money Lex, you only show up for the money one. I was like, dude, it was a win. What do you mean? But again, the first race that we won, it was actually my sponsor too, and I'll kind of describe the night of why it was nostalgic for us really. But so again, I'm in real estate. Most of and then they're all supporters. Don't get me wrong, but like us as realtors, like we're busy people. Like we're like if you're sitting around doing a whole lot of nothing, you are not making no money. You are not doing no business. You are going nowhere in life. So that's kind of like my consensus, let's say. But so again, the first night that we won, it was like I convinced like a ton of our people from the office to come up, and like they're not dirt track people.
Yeah.
They're not into racing. They're not like they might go out and enjoy a couple of drinks here and there with some friends. So this was kind of like that outlet, like let's go cheer on Lex. So that was like the big my sponsor, who was he's a mortgage lender. The side note, the mortgage world has just been getting squeezed, so he was one of the sponsors that kind of fell off after a little while. He is a longtime supporter, still talks with us. James Hope, he's a great guy. I still recommend him on the mortgage side of everything. Again, if he's not able to sponsor us through the couple years, he's got a heck of an operation to support with what he has going on. But anyway, he sponsored the night. He put up an extra $1,000 per division. So modified and sportsman each got an extra $1,000. We were making $600 at the time. He put up an extra $1,000, so it was $1,600 up for grabs plus TP trailer money. I think they put up $200 for a win. So again, our usual payout is like $600 plus $200 contingencies on a regular night, and it was championship night 21. So it was I think it was Hoke and Gilmore were like gunning for like that championship night. So it was like and there was like, this is when like GSP fell off, like when he stopped filming there for a little bit, and before like Whitney and Brittany started doing the videos, Throws on the Hill. So it was like in between. So Brandon Kroll had a camera on. It was Kenny Gilmore, Brian Herthler, and Kenny Bach had a video in there, but like we couldn't. There was no video to buy or anything like that when he offered like GSP videos or per DVD, let's say. But that night was so Kenny Bach is really like the only thing I can see of like he was up there towards the front of us. We started up front. We started fourth. I actually ended up like fading back. So I knew we had a good car that night, but it was like again, like half of my real estate office is in the stands, like my lender guy's there sponsoring the night, so I'm like, be on your P's and Q's, like try and finish as best as you possibly can. And I thought we had a shot at it too. I was like, I'm not saying I was full of it, but as you see through the race, like if you go back, watch the video, it was like, and I started fading away too. Like I thought Joey was gonna get it. He had a good front run with a couple of guys, and then it was just yellows started coming through. But that race was, Joey got tangled up with somebody. He got spun around. So it like left the door open on a restart for me and I think it was Brian Rhodes. Him and I went at it for a while. Shout out to Brian. If he didn't sell that big now, he has that. Anyway, killer deal. I keep talking to him on Marketplace about that. But anyway, it was kind of like attrition. Like I was able to I held my own for a little bit, and then Joey and them wrecked out, so I moved up a row. Started outside, and it was like one of those things too. It was like I got a lead on Brian, but we didn't get that final lap in, so they sent us back, and then I had to start on outside again, and I'm like, don't eat the wall. But that night I felt like we at least really earned that one. Once I got out the clean air, it was I was able to just kind of buckle down and just go for it once we got tires warm. But that was probably so I got a ton of photos and whatnot, but that first night win, my broker, it was the one night that he showed up to the track, and those guys are supporters, but it's not a ton of them show up for all the races or anything like that. Yeah. So it was it was our first win. It was my lender. I was happy to take his money that night. He was just all the photos and everything. Everybody was just ecstatic.
I remember hearing an interview. I was in the pits and I heard you yelling, and I was like, "What the hell is that?"
We were super excited.
Yeah, you guys. And that's cool. It's a cool moment. When
that was championship night 21. So it was Dylan Hogan, Kenny Gilmore were gunning for it there at the end. Kenny got close too. I think he got up to third. Maybe second or third. I think he got to third. I forget, but it was, we got out front, and eventually it was all right. And I just remember coming across the line, I'm like, that just happened? Did it, we're actually pulling in a winner's circle right now? So that was our first memorable. The second win was nice, don't get me wrong, but that was our claim to fame for, first win we got was in late 21. And then we won one in 22, so it was all right, let's move up to modified for 23 and, see if we can keep it going. But obviously it was a lot of learning curve before, you can try and take a win from the front runners in today's world at Grandview. But, which will probably lead into, just because everybody asked me about it, the big wreck that Bobby Gunther Walsh and I had. It was basically, he got into it with another car, and we kind of think that it was feature. We were out towards the back, I got in, but I think I don't think it was championship night, but it was the last couple of races there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because no, I think it was championship night because we tore it up real bad, and everybody was like, "You're gonna make it out?" Because I just wanted to make sixer. I was like, I really want to make sixer. I was even gonna go and buy another chassis to if I had to, because we caved in the front clip a little bit. But anyway, that was late 23 modified and feature. Again, Bobby was a couple spots ahead. And there's GoPros and things out there that you can look on my page for, but I when I tell you when Bobby came down out of thin air and landed on me, I never saw him. There was no I never even you always have that moment when you see the wall coming, you're like, oh, this is gonna hurt. There was nothing. All of a sudden it was all my sheet metal is getting caved in, and I'm completely turned around, and you can even see me in the video. After a second, I just put my hands up in disbelief, what the hell just happened? And shout out to Bobby Gunther Walsh. I feel terrible for wrecking a car like that and hitting the wall that hard. And he left in an ambulance that night with some bumps and bruises, but ultimately he was all right. But yeah, that was probably one of the more memorable things. And I've torn up a car pretty bad and whatnot, but that was and if you look at the video too, he goes up and just we think he hit the wall on throttle possibly, or if he whatever happened at that point, but he goes up into the wall like off the boilerplate, like at the exit or when you go up to the pit right there. He caught the edge of it, went up in the air, and I had my GoPro on too, and like you can even see the video. Like you just see, and like I'm going left through one, and I'm looking through too at that point. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to focus on what's happening ahead of me. He's like out in the boilerplate, and like the bottom of his car does, you know, it's not like I see all white like coming down towards me or anything like that. And like it just happened to work out that like, and I've seen some freak accidents too. Like, you know, when Jordan Henn got rolled on by you know, Houseworth, like that pin came down and hit him in the helmet and compressed his neck. Like again, there's freak accidents or things that happen, and sometimes it's just like a weird freak deal like that. So luckily, when BGW went up in the air and like he came down on top of me, like I never saw him or anything like that. He came in just like in the right way that like if the circumstances could have been a little bit different, like maybe the car would have came in and like, you know, caved in a side of it possibly. It was a lot more like sheet metal damage per se because of the way that I think that it caught that front part of the chassis to start. But yeah, that was probably like my most like memorable story, just like from a freak side of accident.
Oh yeah,
like,
that's a scary accident.
I've hit the wall like a ton of bricks too, like, you know, full throttle, and you're like straight into it. But those cars are actually meant to take more of a front impact versus like anything on the side. So like when a guy just comes rolling down out of thin air on top of you, it's like, like, everybody was like, "Are you okay again?" I'm like, I'm fine. Like I just felt terrible for, you know, like his. I know that he had a second car that he, you know, he didn't repair that one that he rolled that night to run for Sixer. So yeah, that was probably our, you know, our recent highlights, but not that it was a great highlight, but yeah, the good with the bad.
Yeah. Also, that should round us out for tonight. I want to thank you for coming on, and
of course,
hope you have a good 2024 season.
Yeah, you as well.
Definitely is going to be an interesting one. Hopefully everything goes well for everyone.
Lots of melee unfold.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I want to thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you.